Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the YouthLead webinar series. I'm Maria Brindelmeyer, the Senior Knowledge Management Specialist and YouthLead Coordinator with the Youth Power Learning Project at Making Sense International. Before we get started with our speakers for today, a few housekeeping instructions. Please help share the information more widely on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and you can see our hashtags and handles above. The slides and the recording will be shared on youthlead.org after the webinar. On today's webinar and other webinars, you'll get to know our team members. I'm the one on the left, and you can see Abolaji Omitugon and Ikenna Anyadise, two Atlas Corps fellows from Nigeria who focus on knowledge management and communications for both youthlead.org and youthpower.org, including content maintenance and webinars. Nilima Raut, the second from the left, is the project manager for YouthLead and also an Atlas Corps fellow from Nepal. YouthLead is a component of the Youth Power Learning project, and Youth Power Learning is focused on sharing knowledge, learning, tools, and best practices, and what works in positive youth development with the broader development community and with youth. We have defined positive youth development as containing 4 components. Youth should have assets, that could be skills or funding, should have the ability to leverage those assets, that means agency, and the ability to contribute to positive change for themselves and their communities. And youth should also be surrounded by an enabling environment that supports them. Until last year, Youth Power Learning's main focus was on youth supporting organizations, for example, organizations that were implementing youth programs or doing research about youth programs. But the focus had not been on youth themselves as a target audience for the website. With YouthLead, which was launched at the World Bank's Youth Summit in December 2018, the focus is on young changemakers 15 to 35 years old. So let me hand it over to Nilima. Nilima, tell us a little bit more about YouthLead.
Thank you, Maria. The vision for YouthLead is to become the global hub for young changemakers aged 15 to 35, enabling them to maximize their impact through networking, mentoring, and accessing information. The platform offers a great opportunity for youth, different countries, different networks, to inspire and learn from each other, connect beyond their traditional circles, and benefit from many diverse resources and information. And with Google Translate on every page, it is available to a larger group of youth. We have selected over 20 young changemakers as YouthLead ambassadors. The ambassadors are sharing information about YouthLead with their networks and increasing engagement with YouthLead through discussion groups, social media, and now also by sharing their experiences through webinars. In addition to selecting the YouthLead ambassadors, we are also organizing campaigns. For example, a photo contest and a video contest. We are organizing campaigns, mini campaigns by topic, example on mental health or peace building with relevant resources. And we are organizing webinars, some led by ambassadors, some by YouthLead sponsors. We have over 20 sponsors that are collaborating on YouthLead. Now, let me hand it over to today's host of the webinar.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Omitogo Abolaji, and I'm happy to be your host of today's webinar session. Today's webinar topic is titled Project Planning and Execution for Social Impact Leaders. We are super excited to have one of our YouthLead ambassadors present his experience and lesson learned on project planning and execution and how young changemakers can effectively execute successful projects. Our speaker today is Quacy, our YouthLead ambassador from Guyana. Quacy is a youth leader and a public health professional passionate about advocacy, youth entrepreneurship, and community development. He was elected as the first executive president of the Guyana National Youth Council (GNYC), a body with over 4,000 members from ages 14 to 35 years old in Guyana. Quacy works to engage young changemakers in Guyana with other to connect young changemakers in Guyana with other young changemakers globally across the globe. For this webinar, we will not be taking questions until the end of the presentation. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat on the right-hand side of your screen throughout the webinar. We'll get questions later at the end of the presentation. At this point, I would like to hand off to Quacy, who will do a better introduction of himself. Quacy?
Thank you very much, Abolaji, for that very modest introduction. Yeah, so as mentioned, the Guyana National Youth Council, I'm the president-elect, is a body that represents over 4,000 young persons in Guyana. And it is the champion when it comes to educating young people in Guyana about voter education. So in 2015, the Guyana National Youth Council, commonly known as the GNYC, educated the young people, the young populace of Guyana through the Vote Like a Boss campaign on the electoral process and governance through public engagements and consultations. So I'll be applying the project management tools and techniques, specifically the project management plan, using the Vote Like a Boss model to discuss how proper planning is vital for successful project implementation. We usually hear the phrase, if you fail to plan, you have to plan to fail. And so at the end of this seminar is my hope that you have a better idea how to plan for your projects for a very impacting and social viable implementation. So I'm very much interested in project management, civic engagement, and social and behavior change. This is my area of focus for my thesis as I'm a master's in public health candidate. So let's jump right in. So how did it all begin, the Vote Like a Boss campaign in 2015? Well, according to the United Nations Fund for UNFPA, 1.8 million young people ages 10 to 24 in the world, and this represents 25% of the global population. So there are this number of young people in the world, and this represents 25% of the global population. Bringing it home to the Caribbean, Guyana forms part of the Caribbean community through CARICOM, and approximately 60% of the population in the Caribbean community is under 30 years. Guyanese children and youth represent a significant demographic group, 68.8%, and this percent represents the young people below the age of 35. So our national youth policy here in Guyana consider young people from the ages of 15 to 35 years. Now, we did a survey in 2009 with the help of USAID, and it was found that young people are often the most significant group of voters who do not actively participate in the democratic process. Specifically, the LAPOP report sponsored by USAID states that the young citizens between 18 and 25 years old display statistically significantly lower levels of participation than other cohorts. And it is because of these findings that the Guyana National Youth Council was moved to start a young voters education campaign through what is known as the Vote Like a Boss campaign. And we're proud to say that when we were the first country in the world or in the globe to start such a campaign, and since then it has been replicated in other countries, specifically in Africa, for example, in Kenya. And currently we're engaging with some of our neighboring CARICOM countries, Caribbean countries, to replicate this campaign in their respective countries during their national and regional elections, specifically Trinidad and Tobago, and I think Montserrat. So first things first, when you're planning for a project, just like the Vote Like a Boss campaign, you must have your project goals or objectives. For this project specifically, it was to initiate and participate in dialogue with political parties and candidates on issues and to raise specific issues of importance to young voters. Those are education, employment, quality of life, vision of a future. To demonstrate that young people can and will participate in Guyana's civic affairs and provide leadership in governance, among others. So your goals and objectives are usually divided into general objective, or your goal, you can call it that, and your specific objectives. So, for example, well, let me use this opportunity to let you know that your objective always starts with the word to. So it's always to do something. So the general objective in this case with the Vote Like a Boss campaign was to encourage young people and women to be involved in the electoral process. And then our specific objectives, branching out from our general objective or the goal of the project, particularly with this campaign, were to initiate and participate in dialogue with political parties and candidates on issues, and to raise specific issues of importance to younger voters, like I mentioned, education, employment, quality of life, vision of a future. Another specific objective was to encourage further transparency of the electoral process through integrated voter education, and to promote the ideal of ethnic harmony in all aspects of civic and political activity. So after we have our goal, or general objective and our specific objective, we can now move to what we call a project charter. You need your project charter to formalize the start of your project. And it gives the project manager or whoever's in charge of the project the authority to assign resources, human or financial or another project resources to the project activities. So it's an official document, and it provides a clear start and a well-defined project boundaries. So before you actually start your project, you need to have this charter. And I provide here a snapshot of what the charter should look like. For different folks, as we say in Guyana, there are different strokes. So this is just an example. Depending on who's your funder, they might have stipulations on how your project charter can be. In some cases, your project charter can be like a project proposal document, how you propose to implement the project. So usually it has your date, when the proposal or charter was done, your name of your project. So I have an example of a project name of another project that I've done in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Public Health, in my capacity as the National Malaria Focal Point. So that's dealing with malaria and the use of malaria rapid diagnostic test kits in Region 8 in Guyana. So your project charter can have the areas in which you seek to address. If you're looking at quality of your project, if you're looking at communications, your risk, your procurement, you can highlight that. It can look at your application areas. So for example, for Vote Like a Boss, that can come on the civic engagement. In other projects like the malaria project I just spoke about, that can be public health. Usually projects have a start and end date because projects are just temporary for, it's just in a snapshot of time. And usually in your project charter, you want to state when your project will start and when your project will end. In addition to that, this chart would have your project objectives, like I mentioned before, your general objective or your goal, and then your specific objectives. And it can include a description of the project, product, or service that will be generated by the project, also known as your project final deliverables. It will have your assumptions, any preliminary risk that you foresee in the project. Of course, it must have your budget, milestones and dates, so what you want to accomplish during the life of the project. And of course, it must have at the end signatures. So usually the person who's funding the project, a representative of that organization who's funding the project would sign, and the project manager would sign, showing that there's agreement in the terms of reference pertaining to the project. So your project charter is very important as you look to begin your project. And as I mentioned, in some instances, they call it your project proposal. So after we have our goal, general objective, and our specific objectives, and we have our project charter or project proposal, we need to know who will be involved in the coordination of the project, who are the mentors. And for this, you have to have a stakeholders management plan. Now, any plan, any project plan, usually it has is aligned to one of your specific objectives. So I did not give you all my specific objectives for the Vote Like a Boss campaign, but one of it would have been to engage a wide range of civic society organizations that work with young people and women. And that specific objective would speak specifically to the stakeholders management plan. Now, any plan would have that objective, that specific objective as your goal, and then it will be broken down into strategic lines. Then you have actions coming out of those lines, actions or interventions. The main thing from your stakeholders management plan is that you must understand how you're going to manage your stakeholders' expectations. What do they expect from being involved in this project? And how will you manage having them being involved in the project? How will you communicate with them? If you're going to have monthly meetings, weekly meetings, if you're going to communicate by email, if you're going to form a WhatsApp group, it should tell you what will be not only how you will engage them, but the channels that you will use to engage these stakeholders. In the Vote Like a Boss campaign, we engaged the Guyana Women Roundtable and also youth organizations, for example, the University of Guyana Student Society. We involved an organization called Youth Challenge. We focus organizations that were working with young people and women. So when you have your stakeholders management plan, you can now dig in more into your project by having a scope, time, and cost management plans. Now, why I lump these three together is that they're usually called the important trio in project management: scope, time, and cost. They're considered in some literature as the most important elements of your project. So if you change one, you have to change the other. So your scope is basically your work that is required to complete your project successfully. All the work that you need to do It details all the work that you need to do for successful project implementation. Your time tells you the duration of your project. It breaks it down into how long you will take for each activity in your project. So you usually have a time allotted to each activity, and then you have milestones. Milestones is like key points in your project. So for example, one example of a milestone will be the signing of your project charter. That's a key point, because without that, you cannot start your project. As I mentioned, you must have your project charter signed by all the governing bodies involved, your funders, your project manager, and so on. So that will be, for example, like a milestone in your project. So your time management plan would have your activities in your project and the time allotted for each activity. And of course, it will show you the milestones. So if you have a delay in one of your activities, maybe you took longer than you foresee. If you do not want to go past the duration of the project, you will have to put more resources. Maybe you have to increase your human resource or increase cost somewhere so that you get the same work done in the same amount of time, the duration of the project, right? So you've seen when you affect one aspect of these three, something else is affected. So if you increase time in one activity, you might have to increase cost so as to complete the project in the same duration. If you increase the scope, the work done for the project, but then you might have to also increase the time, so you have a longer project duration. Or if you want to maintain the same duration, you have to increase your cost because you want more work in the same time. So scope and time, they have a direct correlation with your costs. As I mentioned, all these plans must be linked to a specific objective. They must have your activities that you hope to accomplish. In the case of the cost management plan, it would have your financial allocation for each activity. So if you're going to print flyers, it will tell you how much it will cost to print your flyers. If you're going to travel to distribute the flyers, it will tell you how much it will cost you to do that other activity, and so on. So that's the main difference between the cost management plan and the time management plan and the scope. I know that this is just a 20-minute roughly webinar, so I can't go into too much details, but I'm just whetting your appetite, and you can do further research and you can ask questions that I can help. So once you have your scope, time, and management plans, another important plan that you should have is your communications plan. This goes hand in hand with your stakeholders management plan or your stakeholders plan, because it tells you how many people you're reaching and your impact number in your area. So it tells you how will you reach out to your stakeholders. Your stakeholders are not those who are directly involved in your project, like the youth organizations and the Guyana Women Roundtable, in this case, the Vote Like a Boss project, but also the end users, the young people that you hope to reach. How will you get to them? Will you hold a concert to educate them about the importance of going out and voting? Will you hold a voters education party? Will you have fairs? Will you have engagements or debates with key political players? And you invite the young people. The communication plan will outline all of that. So I said any plan you must have your strategic lines, then you have your strategic actions, and then you can break it down further into interventions or activities. So your interventions or activities will tell you specifically what you'll be doing. So now we look at some good practices, some successes and challenges on reflection of this project. So what are the best approaches that made an impact or increase your impact? And what would you do differently if you started the campaign or project again? When we did the project in 2015, after we had the project proposal or the project charter, we went into full gear implementation. And so we had to be planning the project on the ground and in the same time implementation. And because of that, we didn't do a lot of planning as detailed as I'm outlining now. And that's why I'm using this webinar to talk about the importance of planning, so that you won't make the mistakes that we've encountered at the 2015 national and regional general elections here in Guyana. So what we would have done differently if we had to do it all over again is that we would have done a proper project management plan. We were not able to do that because we received the monies to start the campaign. We did the project proposal, the project charter, and then we went full gear into implementation. So we had to be planning and implementing at the same time. And there wasn't much documented along the way during our plans, so therefore we don't have copyright laws on what we're doing, if to put it that way. And so when other countries replicated the Vote Like a Boss campaign, we had to share our information more verbally than written documents or written plans. And you know, that has its challenges in that, you know, yes, other countries who are adopting it can be able to tweak it to suit their context, to suit their local context. But with regards to ownership, we could not have the total buy-in or the total ownership of it because we didn't have much documented. So that was one of the things that we would have done differently if we had to do it. So some challenges that we've encountered. So some lessons learned. That's one of the lessons learned that I shared about it. No proper project management plan, and hence we weren't able to have a bit of more ownership when our copyright laws enforced when other countries replicated the Vote Like a Boss campaign. Another thing is that we were not able to do sufficient monitoring evaluation, because if you don't have a plan, you won't have proper indicators documented. And if you don't have your indicators down, for example, the number of young people you hope to reach with flyers, or the number of young persons that you hope to reach through fairs, the number of community engagements that you hope to have. Those were not documented properly. And so we weren't able to monitor effectively the success of the project. Yes, we can give anecdotal evidence of success, but it wasn't measured in a scientific way. So that was a challenge. So I think when we repeated the process in smaller elections at the regional level, what we call regional elections here in Guyana, local and regional elections, we were able to have a little more planning being done, and we were able to document our indicators to have that monitoring process taking place. So that's another lesson learned and another challenge that we encounter. If we have documented scientific evidence of success, it's easier to go to the funders and donors to lobby for more money. So very important also is having risk and quality management plans. This was not done when we had our Vote Like a Boss campaign. So we didn't brainstorm at the beginning what are the risks that we hope to encounter during the project implementation. So not brainstorming those risks before the project, we weren't able to come up with any risk mitigation plan. So because of that, so the role of YouthLead in this whole process, the platform, the YouthLead platform provides the opportunity for young change makers around the world like myself and other young people in my country on the different youth networks to highlight what they're doing. So for example, I can connect with other youth networks apart from the network I'm involved in, the Guyana National Youth Council, GNYC. And I can find relevant resources, funding opportunities, events, and project information that will be useful for the projects that we're doing here, like the Vote Like a Boss campaign. I can also share the lessons learned from Vote Like a Boss campaign so that other young change makers who want to replicate this project in their respective countries, they can do that. So usually we reach young change makers by sharing about our experiences via the social media, Facebook or Twitter, and via various youth-oriented events or discussions that others can benefit from those opportunities, and these can be shared on the platform. So, advice for my peers who want to start a similar project, talk to us here in Guyana about our lessons learned, how to get started, like our counterparts in Trinidad and Tobago and Montserrat who have begun the discussion, the conversation, so we can share with you. Of course, ensure that you have, in addition to your project proposal or your project chart, ensure that you have a plan outlining the different areas, your scope, your time, your cost, your stakeholders, your communications. You might want to add in your project resources plan also in there. Ensure you have all that before you start the project. So that, of course, if you want to include a risk management plan, you can too, depending on how large you want this project management plan to be, and maybe a quality assurance or a quality management plan. So these you can do differently so as to make your project implementation a little more successful than we did. And we hope that, well, I hope that my YouthLead peers can share these experiences that we have in Guyana in terms of engaging young voters. We hope that they can share it with their young change makers in their respective local contexts, and maybe implement it, and maybe we can start a collaboration, twinning one network to another in different countries on the same project. So I think I'll close here for now, and I'll open the floor for any questions and answers. Well, I'll do the answers. Any questions? Maybe you might have a comment. Any questions or comments you might have at this time? Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Quacy. Thank you very, very much. This was very interesting, and thanks for sharing the processes and the procedures involved in creating a successful project. And this is, I'm sure, has been helpful for other young change makers who are also considering creating projects, for themselves. We'll be jumping to taking questions. I can hear a few echoes. So we'll be jumping into taking questions from our audience, and we already have some questions already queued up here. Hello, Quacy.
Hello. Hi, I'm here. Thanks.
Okay. So I have some questions already queued up here for you, and I'm reading those questions to you. And the first question is, what has been the biggest challenge for you so far in your change-making activities, most especially in dealing with or partnering with organizations or even the government, and how have you been able to overcome them? Did you hear the question?
Yes, can you repeat it one more time? I think there was a problem with the audio.
Yeah, so it says, what has been the biggest challenge for you so far in your change-making activities and in dealing especially with the government or other organizations, and how have you been able to overcome these challenges?
Okay. So I think one of the biggest challenges is that in my local context, people look down on young people. They think that we do not have enough experience or expertise to be given or any opinion on certain issues. And so when you come to the round table to discuss certain issues, you're like the underdog. So you have to prove yourself to the government officials or persons in other organizations that, hey, you have a say on this issue, you have experience to back what you're bringing to the table, and that you're competent enough to talk about the issues that are at hand. Not because you're young and we're not as we don't have the experience or the command to talk on issues pertaining to maybe national development, or it could be youth work or any other issue because of our youth. We speak not on behalf of ourselves, but we speak on behalf of the young people who we represent, the young people at the grassroots level who we interact with, and we hear their concerns. So we bring with us the voice of the young people to the table. Probably not the number of years, but the voice of the young people. And we deserve a right to be heard as well. So I think that's the biggest challenge, and I think how we overcome that is by ensuring that our organization or who we represent is a wide range of young people. So usually it's good to quote the numbers of young people that you represent when you're discussing issues, so that they'll know it's not your own opinion you're bringing to the table, but you're bringing the voice of the young people to the table.
Awesome, thanks. So the next question goes thus: how can youth develop project planning, management, and development skills? Do you necessarily need to have gone to project management schools or have certifications to have this knowledge, or is it something that they can pick up along the way through knowledge or resource sharing platforms or sessions?
Well, they say that the best form of education is on-the-job training. I do agree with that statement to some extent, but this does not minimize the need for formal education or theoretical education on a particular subject area. And project management is a science, and I think there is place for being in the classroom and learning. And in this technological age, we can do it online. I did my master's in project management online through Organization of American States Scholarship. And I did my online classes at a university in Costa Rica that's attached to the Project Management Institute. So for busy young professionals, there's opportunity in this technological age, this age of globalization, to do your courses if you want to do diploma and a master's online, so as to get some formal knowledge. But I would advise that if you're going down that road, that you position yourself in a project management office or an organization that's engaged in projects, so that you can have the on-the-job training, the experience. So you're learning theoretically with some practical experience, and that hand in hand would make you an expert project manager.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Quacy. And the last question is, what tools have you found to be useful? And are there any places or websites where free templates are available? And just to add to that, what has been the most difficult part when you develop a project plan?
Wow. Well, for me personally, the most difficult part, since I do not have a background in accounts or finances, is my cost management plan. Ensuring that my costing is as detailed as possible. It's very important that you do not miss anything in your costing. And sometimes you have to, some budgets and costings are something you have to do and redo to ensure you have everything in. Even should have a contingency plan within your costs. So just in case you need to increase the scope of your project, the work done, the work required to get your project running, you have some reserve there that you can tap into, that you can use. So all of that you have to take into consideration. So not having, that's for me personally, because I don't come from a finance background. I come from a science background, medical sciences. So that was, for me, the most difficult part of developing the project management plan. And of course, there's help online. There you can go to the PMI website, Project Management Institute, PMI.org, and you can register as a user, and you can have loads and loads of information that would help you in the field of project management.
Thank you very much, Quacy. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for sharing your insights and knowledge. Thank you also again. I would also like to thank our audience for joining us today on today's webinar. And if you have any question, please feel free to post the questions in the chat box, and our speakers will be attending to them. If you have not joined YouthLead, I encourage you all to do so, and this will enable you to network with other young change makers and also join the discussion groups on YouthLead. As a member, you can post your content, share resources, your short videos or blogs, or even events and other funding opportunities with other young change makers on YouthLead. You can also join our discussion groups and also post your projects and also get visibility for your projects. And every contribution you earn on YouthLead, you earn points, and you earn badges based on these points also. Every month, members also get to get YouthLead newsletters, and where we highlight our young change makers on the platform. You can also follow us on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, to continue to engage with us. And above all, please reach out to our sponsors and continue discussion with them about these topics, and also in the discussion groups. I would also use this opportunity to say thank you to our many sponsors, in addition to the funding, they contribute resources, and also the youth network to the platform. And of course, you'll be hearing from YouthLead sponsors from time to time and on various webinars. Last but not least, again, I'd like to thank you all again for joining us today. We hope you will join us our next webinar, and continue to check our event page on YouthLead for more webinar announcements, or even on Facebook for maybe webinar announcements. And as I said in the beginning, some of these slides will be available on the YouthLead website, and then also the presentation will be available on the YouthLead website. Thank you all to all the registrants again, and I hope to see you next time.